Уважаемые участники форума «Финополис», мы приглашаем вас в зал.
Esteemed participants of the FINOPOLIS forum, we invite you to proceed to the plenary session conference hall, and we start the section on the national infrastructure, and the moderator is Ms. Olga Skorobogatova. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, and we will continue discussing what was referred to by our colleagues in the morning, speaking about the status of the infrastructure and what should be done to develop it. So we'll have to discuss what elements the infrastructure should be composed of. Let me introduce my colleagues. Alexey Kozyrev, Deputy Minister of Communications and Mass Media; Mikhail Osiyevsky, President of Rostelecom; Anton Govor of Moscow Exchange; Alexey Emelin, Member of the Board of Directors, Chief Executive Officer of Alfa-Bank; and Oliver Hughes is Chair of the Management of Tinkoff, and Ram Sharma, Chairman, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. That's the entity that has been implementing the identification and biometry platform. So let me tell you what we would like to discuss in details. Indeed, we've been paying lip service to the necessity to develop for the state, to participate, to set up regulations, to protect the data. So there are many complicated issues high on the agenda, and what should be the element of the infrastructure, and it calls for thorough elaboration at all the levels, both by the authorities and by the commercial entities. And I would like to ask Mikhail Osiyevsky, and he mentioned that as an operator, his company is responsible for the development of the biometry platform. Indeed, together with the Ministry of Communication and Mass Media, the information which is available in the unified identification system, we need a biometrical platform that might be utilized for remote identifications of the persons, both for providing financial services and state services, without interfering with the banks and preventing them from developing the biometry and providing assurances for its flexibilities when used by the state when we talk about remote identification of citizens for providing financial and non-financial services. And Mikhail wanted to share the information about the prototype that his colleagues have developed, and then we will discuss what is the evolution of this system possible. Thank you. I would like to say that the choice of Rostelecom is not the position of the state, but the state had a say in this decision, but it is the consolidated position of the Russian banks who regard us as a formidable technological partner. There are no contradictions, friction between us, and that's why our projects are advancing that well. But it is better to see it once than to hear about it several times. So that's why I would like to invite you to our stand and to pass through the procedure of building your digital self. But now I would like to invite you to see a small video, if you please. digital economy program provides for the development of digital platforms and services. Many services in the banking community are provided online. However, using logins and password is not enough to receive official services that should be legally binding. It is necessary to match the passcode with the identity, and it is necessary to have a protected access from any point in the world. Now, to open an account, the clients will have to physically visit the branch, and this task could be resolved by using additional factor of security, safety, biometry, which matches the password and with the identity of the person. Rostelecom is developing their biometrical system that provides the technology of access to many digital services to the banks, and the banks will be able to open accounts remotely, to transform the branches and to make a step to transfer to digital banking. Biometry in the future will be a tool to receive services that call for identity confirmation, distance education, telemedicine, retail, using municipal and state services, and many other services. To receive remote services, it is sufficient to physically visit the branch once to get registered in the unified authentication and identification system and to provide the biometrical data, voice and the image, and it will be possible to use the e-sign in the banks where the services are required. In the future, the users will be able to use many other services. The remote identification procedure is pretty straightforward. The login and password should be entered onto the portal of state authorities, and the figure should be entered. Then the voice and video will be matched with the images that are stored in it. If those parameters match, then the access could be provided. The Rostelecom biometric system is your digital freedom. Dictor, the speech was is better than I could tell you, but I would like to accentuate a few things. And now the unified authentication and identification system has registered millions of people, and so we have the foundation. It is all the users of the portal of the state services. These are the vigorous users, and they know how to use digital services. The second thing is that in Russia there's a great number of high-tech quality solutions that make it possible to select such a model which with a high probability would be able to identify the personality, identity. We work with the Russian software developers, biometry developers, and there is such an entity that have been empowered with the rights to develop standards, regulations in this area, which is very important that those decisions, those solutions will be statutory. So that will be a system that will be absorbing the new technological tools from the market, and of course, before it is given consideration, and we have just discussed it with the governor of the central bank, and we asked how could we deal with mute people? What kind of services could be provided to them? Indeed, there are many nuances and many details of how to make this system serviceable and operable for handicapped people. However, if the people have handicaps with respect to their mobility, this system is very important. So physically visiting the required office, they would be able to receive the services in any bank without leaving their homes. So I would like to call upon all the bankers who are interested in that kind of technologies to proactively participate in the project. The central bank, together with the Ministry of Communications, are in charge of these projects with respect to developing the legal framework. There is a draft law that has passed first reading in the parliament, and I think by the end of the year we will go through all the legal motions, and most of the banks have got specific applications that could be used in their business process. That's why what we have discussed during the morning session is a reality, and I am sure that next year we will be able to sum up the results of the work. So we are facing two challenges when we have been developing the architectural approaches. The first challenge, the first bottleneck is as follows. We realize that we cannot limit the solutions with one platform, and it should be some kind of bus bar that would cover the geometry and the safety that for the banks to identify the clients, and then the bank should be joined by the insurance company and pension funds. And at that, I would like to emphasize that the bank, for their purposes, could use some other biometric parameters other than the voice and face. But these two things, voice and face, could be just developed, and it's quite possible that the iris of the eyes could be added to that, and the system is based around 2 or 3 parameters. And together with the Ministry of the Communication, we realize that we are just at the start of the long pathway, and the evolution, the development of the problem will develop on what the tasks the banks are facing. And now I would like to forward the question to Mr. Sharma. In India, when the biometric identification platform were used, some other things were chosen. It is the fingerprints and the iris of the eyes. Why this choice? That's the first question. And then, what is the future of the development of the system for both financial and non-financial services, Mr. Sharma?
May I request to load the presentation? Let me first answer your question as to why India choose to have both fingerprints and iris. We actually found that fingerprints, have an accuracy level of as high as 95%. So 1.3 billion's 5% is 65 million. So we would have a potential of 65 million people having duplicate identity, so to say. So therefore, iris and fingerprints, both these independent modes of biometrics, they give you an accuracy of 99.97%. So that's why we had to choose both these attributes. They also have a side effect, a side benefit. If somebody does not have finger and he is not able to authenticate, he could use iris. So essentially, both these provide much more flexibility in terms of authentication. So you could use any of the parameters, either any of your iris or any of your fingerprints. So that's the thing. And now let me just sort of talk about a little bit on the India's digital backbone, what we have done both in terms of identity as also other platforms. So one is, I just wanted to bring out the layered innovations, approach. 125 years of power generation, if Thomas Alva Edison was to return to Earth today, he would still recognize these generators, right? Now, come back to telecom. If Mr. Graham Bell was to return, would he recognize these two similarities in those two instruments? Certainly not, because this is the then and this is now. So the point which I am trying to make is that layered innovations actually, they do a mass flourishing. Layered innovation is the best way to go forward. Giving an example, it doesn't seem to work. This is essentially, the layering of innovations. If you look at the, let's say, internet protocols, you have TCP, IP, internet, SMTP. They are the broad, layered platforms. On top of this, you have Google open APIs and platforms like Google Maps is an example. Then you have smartphones which have iOS and other systems, and then you can build platform. And then on top of platform, payment platforms, you can build applications, e-commerce, taxi, hotels, etc. So this is the way applications in today's digital world need to be structured. You can't have vertically integrated application because that's not going to scale up. The digital platform which we built, identity platform, it has certain unique properties. Like TCP/IP, it is an hourglass architecture. Many of you who must have studied computer science would know this. And basically, this is minimal. We just collect 4 information, which is name, gender, date of birth, and communication address. It is standardized, it's simple design, easy to execute, and easy to build applications on top of it. And this, we create identity as a utility, as an enabler of doing things. It allows innovations on all sides, and it amplifies ecosystem players. And these are some of the application examples. Where do I point it? So we built, as I said in the morning, we built this JAM, Janadhan, Aadhaar, and Mobile. This is the platform for India's progress. So we created, as I said, 300 million beneficiaries of accounts, bank accounts, which were all created using the digital identity infrastructure. We have $10 billion in these accounts, and they are accounts of very, very poor people. And these 126,000 business correspondents we have for the bank, so that you don't need brick and mortar infrastructure, but at the same time you can have human beings, sort of interacting. We created, 1 billion in 5.5 years. This is the digital identity, and this is the way it has progressed. It started in 2011, September 2010 to be precise, and then we have gone to 1093 million in just about till last year's. The number of smartphones in our country are rising at the rate of 25 millions per quarter. This is also followed by regulatory in the sense that in 49 years we had 14 banks. They were licensed by banking regulator. In the last 2.5 years, we have 21 banks. So more licenses to bank. And they are differentiated licenses. There are some banks which are only payment service banks. So we have what is called a category of bank called payment banks. Aadhaar is a number which is unique, lifetime, and it goes with you, in the sense that it's not reused for any other person. So if a person dies, the number also goes with him wherever he or she goes. There's no more physical presence required, no more photocopies. And this is about Aadhaar. On the payment platform, we created unified payment interface, that architecture of any bank to any bank, any application to any application. So one, it is ubiquitous, it is easy and immediate payments. It also has push and pull, so you can have collect payment calls. You can have virtual payment addresses. So you can say, let's say ICICI is one of the banks, you can say RS Sharma @ICICI. That's my payment address, and you can just transfer money using that address. So it's actually virtual payment address. Validation assurance, it goes back and confirms. Minimal issuer acquirer cost, there is no issuer or acquirer part, and now we have more or less zero cost of merchant discount rates, as they say, timely notifications. We built on top of this trinity the Janadhan, Aadhaar, and mobile. We have 1.2 billion mobiles. We are linking those mobiles with Aadhaar numbers. And with that, you have what is called a presenceless layer through authentication. You can do remote authentication and do services. You have paperless layer, you have cashless layer, and you have a consent layer, digital consent layer. So you build again on the same layered architecture, you build applications on top of these. And of course, you have applications on top, which is commerce, credit, investments, skills, and other applications. These are the numbers, we have 295 million accounts, 1.17 billion Aadhaar, 350 million smartphones, 600 million authentications done, 1.06 million phone users, electronic KYC 340 million, 21 million e-signs. So all these numbers speak for themselves. Why it is disruptive? A, it allows innovations. It's broad-based, ubiquitous, inclusive payment platforms. It actually cuts onboarding costs because now you can open a bank account sitting at home using just digital authentication. It actually cuts transaction costs because there is no friction in transactions and therefore there are virtually zero costs. There are no physical presence required. It's actually aligned market goals with social goals. We are able to transfer money in billions of credit transactions taking place through what we call direct benefit transfers using this Aadhaar as a financial address. So I don't need to know your bank account details, I just need to know your unique ID number. And it increases trust in the system, it allows new business architecture to emerge. Now it costs for the large banks, turnaround time is now 6 days to 1 hour. You can just open, reduce drop-offs, etc. These are savings which happen. Similarly, onboarding time for the telecom. Now, one of our telecom operators, he made 100 million customers in a matter of 150 days. And that was possible only because of this digital identity authentication and onboarding. So this time has come down from 1 day to 10 minutes and cost has come down virtually to very, very minor cost. These are authentications, the authentications, the way they are progressing. Now we have 34 million authentications per day. In 1 day, 34 million people in India authenticate themselves for getting various services. I'll just conclude. Now, one of the issues which the banks have is actually credit. Credit is a major problem. Why? Because you don't have any credit histories. Now, once you have these digital transactions, you are able to build credit histories. And then you will be able to do digital credits online, kind of. So that's, and actually the problem is poor people have the highest interest rates. Now this will be possible. This lady who is just a daily wage worker, she has all these issues. You can build applications on top of it. And then again, you can build all kinds of Aadhaar, eKYC, UPI, other kinds of applications which will solve her credit problem. So essentially credit also by these digital transactions, digital footprints of these transactions, you will be able to access credits at much lesser rates of interest because now you have a credit history even if you are a poor person. Thank you very much. And of course, credit at a scale, and this is what a robust foundation to enable innovation solution to India's hard problems. Let me underscore this part. These solutions may not be appropriate in certain domains, and we are not saying that they are all universally applicable, but certainly for our country, our hard problems we have been able to solve through this digital identity infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. I've taken part for a third time with Mr. Sharma in discussions like this, and his presentations are becoming longer and longer. And the system is developing. When we began from Aadhaar, we are now talking about interfaces and the payment systems. When you defined the platform as an element of national infrastructure, then how did you decide who should be responsible for it? The government, the partners, or the companies?
Very important because we built this foundation without any eligibility, in the sense we built this as a pure platform. So for example, it is not the banks who are going to use it, it's not the telecom companies who are going to use it, anybody can use it. And once you build a horizontal platform, then you see this is the world's first identity without eligibility. It does not entitle you for anything. No rights, no entitlements, not even citizenship. Aadhaar is available to every resident of India, which means you don't need to be an Indian citizen to get an Aadhaar. Which means even citizenship is an entitlement which is not part of this. And once you build this infrastructure as a very open platform, then every domain is easy to use it. And therefore we decided this should not be linked to any specific, it was not built with banks in mind. Financial inclusion, of course, is one of the most important issues which India faces. But that was not the only motivation to build this identity. As I said in the morning, many people did not have any formal identity papers. And therefore, they could not access any formal system, because the first question any system is going to ask you, who are you? And if you're not able to answer that, you can't say, I am this so and so. No, where are your papers? And if I don't have a paper, then I'm disabled from accessing those systems. And this was one of the prime motivation to build Aadhaar.
As far as I understand, we were and are at different points. So the fact that there are certain residents who have no information, no bank accounts, no ID as such. This is what was the motivator to create a system and a paradigm when where the government and the regulatory authorities assumed responsibility for this infrastructure, reaching up to an individual, a client, a legal or physical person. In our country, business took a different path of development, but nevertheless, much of what has been mentioned by our Indian colleague is applicable to Russia. Biometry elements are very applicable, and we will look at them. And now I have a question to Alexey Kozyrev, who was initially also at the start of the road, although I believe we are now on the home stretch of creating a biometry system. What do you think we need to integrate these platforms nationally in partnership with business? What are the prospects you see for yourselves, and what other elements of the digital world, the digital space, do we need to adopt in the financial infrastructure? Thank you. You've asked some very interesting questions. Of course, our tasks are different from those of India. We don't need to identify citizens because they have all of them an ID, but we need to make sure that people who have no physical access to the bank or telecom infrastructure so that they can have access remotely. A lot of data associated with a citizen are stored by government databases and systems like ownership of property, status, marital status, and many other data, and all those resources need to be associated with a unique identifier. And this project is under implementation in this country so that every person is given a unique code applicable and functional in any system, and there's a profile that is generated which the person has the power to control. And we must also make sure that people can transfer information about themselves reliably and safely. And we need to use a system of electronic identification. Some information that people know, like a login, something that people own, a mobile phone. We need some confirmation of the person having control of that device via confirmation codes and so on. And then thirdly, biometry, which you cannot really give to anyone else. And this is one of the factors that assures a reliable and safe system of managing people's identity and data from government and commercial information systems. We're starting from video images, doing work on video and voice and fingerprints, and the iris will be added, and then we will decide for what range of risks what biometry data could be used. For example, in order to obtain national passport, you will need a fingerprint, but you may not need it for, some small money transfer. Some may not require any biometry at all, but the ID platform we are building will be universal and uniform. It will be used for government services, telecom services, and all other commercial services that do not require physical presence. And it's very important to decide what needs to be added to identification so that the platform makes it possible to develop some other useful services. Apart from identifying a citizen and apart from citizens and apart from managing their data, we need to implement cloud signature services. It is often required, but so far it is inconvenient to use, and we are planning to implement that on the basis of electronic ID. Secondly, services associated with the management of personal data, like KYC, when people can issue authorization for the use of their data in government systems or bank data systems. Imagine a distributed credit bureau when a person that has a credit history at one credit institution authorizes another one to access that information. And this will mean a totally different approach to protection and management of personal data. And a third very important element of this platform is the possibility of managing documents and legal papers like registered letters that you often must send and receive and certify receipt and sending. It's the possibility of storing certain documents owned by citizens. And people hold a lot of papers and documents that are not in any government systems. For example, people's education certificates are not electronically stored. Using this platform, people could transfer them into electronic format and then use them. This can also be used for the keeping of service records.
So this platform could be very instrumental in this respect. So the first step will be to launch e-identification based of biometry for financial sectors, and we have experience of using it in telecom to make a contract on telecom services. Then we will hook up all the e-gov services, starting with the qualified digital signature, because the availability of the e-sign will open up a lot of services to be followed up by developing a new system of managing personal data when an individual might give consent for access to the personal data in the state sector, etc. That's the idea, and I would like to add for the audience not to be under the illusion that it will be one platform, one biometry platform that will be used for it. There are a number of the platforms that should be integrated based on the interface. And another thing that Mr. Oleg Tinkov has referred, when we resolve the issue of the unique identificator, that we can start with the personal persons. If we have a platform with all the biometrical data, we do not have a unique identificator to ensure to make the transactions easy. That's true. When we talk about the platform, we mean integrated information systems. We have state unified identification and authentication system, and the Ministry of Communication and Mass Media is the operator of this system, and it is the ID provider. We have biometrics services developed by Rostelecom, and we will be using it in the automatic identification authentication system, and we will have biometrics service on the basis of iris of human beings that the Ministry of the Interior will be responsible for. So we are talking about the integration of the different platform. As far as unique identification is concerned, the government has approved the concept of compiling a unified register of the population based on the registration in the marriage book. The service that is responsible for it will collect all the information from the registrar office into one place, and so there will be a list of all the citizens of the Russian Federations that were used to be born in Russia, getting married, divorced, and all that information will be compiled, and then the register will all the people in the register will receive a unique number, and it is not necessary for the individual to know that number, because all the other identifiers from the other system will be linked. And when the register is generated, then the taxpayer identification, the driving license, the phone number, the email, all the other things, and it will be just enough to know one identificator. If a person knows the mobile phone number, then through the mobile number it will be possible to find all the other identificators to manage the personal data. And so the register of the population will be compiled till 2009, and then there will be the ecosystem of the data based on the register will be built. I don't think this is not the best suitable system for the register. Why not revert to the e-passport, which the idea that we have discussed some time before? The information resources of the different agencies and organizations are distributed in it is either a taxpayer number or the passport or the pension fund number. And so if the e-passport is issued by the Ministry of the Interior, it will not appear in the other data. So for us to have a unique, unified identificator, we should have an integrated list of the citizens that will have the unified identificator, and then it should be included into all the databases. And in such a way, we will have connected information resources that will generate the e-profile of our personality. And it is not it's not easy. It's a complicated things, and I think the temporary solution could be a profile of the person, of the citizen in the unified authentication identification system, because when we receive the list of the information that we are supposed to present to the lending organization, we added a number of the blanks, and that's why we have taxpayer number, pension fund number, telephone, email. If there are applications that will need to have some other identifications, then we can do that. We can complement the profile of the person in the unified system. It's just a matter of time, because we live in the period when time is a resource and the speeds means everything besides reliability and quality. And I'm just concerned that the whole story with the unified database will take a long of time to compile. We'll just be lagging behind. As an identificator, the pension fund number might be okay. It should be discussed with banking and non-banking community, but we would like to have a better progress with respect to the unified identificator. It's a question for Mr. Emelin as to the representative of the business. We are discussing the elements of the infrastructure and the approaches to build the infrastructure. You are in the midst of it all, dealing with the businessmen, bankers, and what do you think the priority is to implement the infrastructure, and what capacities, what capability of the infrastructure you would like to see that could be done by the regulators? Thank you for the question. And the answer to the question was in your previous short passage. For us, time is of great importance. What we can get in the next month is much more valuable than we can get years after. And the more so, we have some duties, responsibilities, legally binding than that we have to use, and it is absolutely critical for us to ensure the functioning of those resources from the point of view of technologies and the content. And it was mentioned that one of the elements of the biometric system will be cross-checking the passport data, and we know there are significant problems associated with that. That is the resource that is migrating from the Federal Migration Service to the Interior Ministry, to the police. And for us, the receipt of the passport data is a must to get through the procedure of legalization. And if there is a failure to receive that kind of data, we will deny these services, and it is a violation of the rights of the people. And so that's why it's a priority for us to receive the identity information. And that's why the procedure of updating the data is prescribed over there, and the Ministry of the Interior is supposed to provide the data for the unified system. But I think it is important to implement this service as an individual component. And I was excited with what Alexey has been talking about, but he was talking about the ideal world. Inside, we have a current task, a mission related to the biometrical approach. It is understandable we connect the biometrical identification with the banking contract, and we do not have the environment for storing this information. And even if we have the reliable information, and indeed I passed through the biometrical identification at his stand, and one of the elements is to give your consent to make a contract of the specific content. And so if the matter is taken to the court for whatever reason, then the presentation of the documents to the court will be quite difficult until there is a repository of the unified system, and such a storage environment could be one of the sub-projects of the biometrical system, biometrical infrastructure. And I think it will be necessary to break through the system into stages, and we can evaluate the systemic effects of individual sub-elements of this system, and then we can define priorities and getting positive results at each stage for the market on the whole. It is not important for the banking community only, but for the financial market on the whole, and other applications have been mentioned today, like healthcare, e-governance, and all the elements are bundled together. And the secondary identification is important. It is difficult to introduce it at the first stage. The results of the biometry and getting the right authorization for any type of transactions. But the sooner we pass through the first stage, the more beneficial it will be for the market. Because if there are limits placed on the amount of the transactions now, we should define right away what will be the timeline of the sandbox and when the system would be able to function at full swing. And we understand that without protecting the data, the system will not be working. So when it will be working, it will be well protected. We do not have risks over here. As far as the implementation is concerned, I think it will be necessary to meet the demand of the banks, and we are ready to render support to the Bank of Russia and regarding the interaction with the pension funds number, and we understand now how we can proceed without breaking Federal Law 52, violating the law on the protection of the physical data, and it will be the document to analyze risks. Analyzing risk is a priority for the banks, and we are prepared to use any channels of communication with the state to receive the respective forms from the tax service and from the bailiffs service system, which hasn't been finalized yet. These are the tasks that we face, and we are dealing with those with our partners, with technological partners as well. We believe, and we do not only believe, but we work on a day-to-day basis to achieve progress with respect to all these services. And it is a huge, mammoth tasks, and it is subdivided into a great number of the components, and it's Olga, being in charge of it, is the prerequisite for the success. When we receive success, that's when we will be altogether overjoyed. And I have a question for Mr. Alexey Marayev. Indeed, the news that a separate digital bank creation, that's what Alfa-Bank decided to do, I think will accelerate greatly the development of the digital finance. There will be a new actor at the market. I think, I hope it will be competitive, and it will be a competitor good enough for a Tinkoff bank. I think not only Alfa-Bank, but the other banking groups will follow the suit. So I have two questions. What is a digital bank for you? I would like to hear your opinion. And question two, do you really believe that the state authorities might help and facilitate the creation of such platforms? And does business need it? Is there any value for business in it? Or the commercial bank can come to terms and they do not need involvement of the regulators?
Thank you very much for your questions. And briefly, to your second question, yes, we do believe it is necessary, and we do see. I'll expand on that later. Now, in answer to your first question about what is a digital bank, it's a very good question because everybody gives its own meaning. What we see as a digital company is a company that thinks about the pains that clients and customers have to go through. It distinguishes between a client and a custom, and what is critically important for it in terms of success indicators is the volume of traffic that the company creates. Understandably, this is based on Internet protocols through various form factors, be it a desktop or a mobile phone, most recently. And the cutting-edge technologies are used to simplify customer experience. Traditional banks look upon, well, what do the traditional banks have? They have balance sheet with assets and liabilities. They have their products, credit cards, and so on. They have a regulator because digital companies are a lot less manageable in their everyday activities than the old financial institutions. And when we talk about a digital bank, as I said earlier, its culture will also be different. So when we say a digital bank, it's a company that addresses specific pains and concerns of its clients. They try to save their clients' time on the basis of cutting-edge technologies and internet protocols. Does that mean that such a service or product or company or bank is not going to have any offline activity at all? No, it doesn't, just as our colleagues from Tinkoff Bank perform some 20,000 deliveries, but Oliver will correct me if I'm wrong, and there are about 2,000 people that are in the field every day to close those deals. It's the last mile of delivery when a physical product is delivered rather than some digital content. So gradually, we're going to migrate into digital, and at some point, we may not need any plastic cards because alternative form factors will be usable. Some time ago, they invented a plastic card, but it could be anything. It could be a ring. It could be a watch. And my colleagues from Mexican have told me that a Mexican bank has signed up for an experiment with a plastic chip embedded under people's skin. So biometry may cover that too. So this is what we see as a digital bank. It's a bank that does what their clients need. And secondly, this is what I call the toothbrush principle. What do you do in order for your brand to appear in your client's mind at least twice a day? It's critical because critical for any bank to get its brand stuck in your client's minds, not a mobile phone. So the frequency of services is also important. And in answer to your second question, in a greater detail, I must admit that our market has taken such a shape that it's not really good for making contracts, and we are thankful for the regulators' effort to play a regulatory integrator's role. Without the involvement of a regulator, there will be no systemic shift. There should be regulator involvement, but with a very clear understanding where this role begins and ends. And it's important for the platform to be opened both at the back end and the front end and elsewhere. And this is the work that is underway, and I think that the association set up in the past year indeed has indicated its efficiency. And hopefully, so, of course, we have yet to cover a long road, but considering that it's a very complex and complicated task to get everybody around the same table, we still are very hopeful that practical steps are really feasible, because practical application is what we like, and not just theory. You're quite right. We're only at the beginning of the road because a large number of active players in the retail business market have joined the association not only in order to talk or discuss, because many associations are just talking clubs, but our task is to be the connecting link, not any instructor, but a connecting link so that we could come to terms with market players about important things and get them implemented. One of the projects is indeed identification, where many banks were involved. Another project that we have defined as a concept is creating a fast payment retail system, but not only for retail, also for B2B and B2C. It was very important and complicated in terms of functional architecture because lobbyist interests were often came to the forefront, and people didn't want to listen to one another. But in the final analysis, we decided it should be a platform built from scratch so that we don't repeat past errors and drag on what's inefficient for the customer. We do not plan to replace commercial banks with this platform. That was the wrong approach initially. We want to create an element of the infrastructure that commercial banks could use to service their clients at a different level of quality, efficiency, and with low costs. And Alexey and his colleagues and Oliver and his colleagues are taking an active part in the prototyping of that system, and we expect such a prototype to see such a prototype by the middle of next year, and we'll get it agreed upon among all the other players and then launch it into production. Now, my question to Alexey: what does this platform, what must this platform bring to business, in your opinion? Well, I believe that to some extent the answer is in the question. It should be robust. Well, any similar platform is also something based on trust. And the fact that it's being developed under the auspices of the regulator does create this element of trust. Robustness and reliability is something that goes without saying, but it should also create some added value, critical added value. As an example, today, as we look upon our clients, we realize that many of our clients would be happy to see that money is delivered when they send money to someone. So far, no one receives such a notification. In principle, it's very easy to see how money has been debited and then credited to a corresponding account, bank account. And there are situations, we have detected them in the past, that some banks delay crediting money to settlement account just in order to encourage people to use their own services rather than other banks' services. And if such a platform could show the status of a transfer at every point in time and as an API and available at wish, that would be very useful to us as clients. I am a client and a bank customer too. And what you said about legal entities is also critically important. Speed, cost, and reliability, and of course equal distance, because, as any platform, it must be independent, and it should not be in the interests of just one or one group of players, no matter what they are. Thank you. Oliver, you used to be the leader of a major international payment system. Then you became an eminent banker. So my question is about your two experiences in the past life and at present. What do you think about the prospects of bank cards? Will they disappear or will they be modified in some way? Also, in terms of your active involvement in this fast payment system development, and your technological developments are very important. We study them. So when such a platform is in place in this country and when all banks and non-banks will be able to use it, shall we still need card systems? And if so, then in what way will businesses distribute their efforts in promoting card products or fast payment products, or will they complement one another? Thank you very much for your question. If you allow me, I will start from afar, from a different subject, and then I'll take this thing which is very close to me. I've been very long in it, practically all my life. As far as what Alexey said about, indeed, we do hold 20,000 meetings a day with our representatives working in the field. We are a digital player. We have no offices. Everything goes end to end until the point in time when we must meet with a client because you love papers in Russia. We need to get their signature and have it in 2 copies, leave a copy with a client, and then take another copy to our bank. You can understand why it is, and there. What you have described is somewhat scary because we are removing barriers to competition and we are reducing barriers to entry for other players. But on the other hand, for all digital players, this is good news. This liberalizes the market, and it will be good for all citizens of Russia, and that's great. Another point and subject. When you write those laws, and I know that a bill has been introduced to the State Duma, don't forget that the law requires that a representative of a bank should identify a client, but not necessarily at a bank office. It should not say that. So when you discuss biometric standards attached to a client ID, that's beautiful, and we are really making a great stride in this direction. Don't forget that Tinkoff and others collect biometric profiles, your voice, facial, and fingerprint data through our representatives, and they should enter them into our system as models. It's someone's fingers playing, says the chairperson.
I've been living in Russia for some 20 years, and I used to see at least a pair of technological leaps to expand the access. So accessibility issue is very important. The first one was in the period between 2000 and 2008, when there was a huge leap, breakthrough in the front office. It was first through GSM, GPRS. There were different telecom channels, and the bank cards system network was developing, and ATMs services in Russia used to be very advanced in Russia, much more sophisticated than in the other parts of the world, and the functionalities and the services that could be provided by the ATMs. And thanks to that, it was possible to see a huge leap in the issuance of the plastic. But so it was the technological breakthrough, or leap in English, leapfrogging, when Russia was ahead of the other countries, and sometime that was the case, when Russia was ahead of the other countries. And another thing was remote banking services, and due to the not only to the advent of mobile communications, but mobile devices, virtually we are carrying supercomputers in our pockets, and it enabled to have leapfrogging in internet mobile banking in Russia. And our mobile applications are one of the best in the world. It doesn't mean that I use the other banking services in other countries and they're awful, and even if there is a progress, but they are not peer to what we are doing. And we are solving huge technological problems. What could be the source of the third leap? That's what Olga is saying, and we are fully supportive what the central bank is doing, and we are members of the FinTech Association. It is huge work, but it is very important project, and we are fully supportive of it. So we need to do faster payments in retailing, and I can pronounce much easier it in English than in Russian, so I will be using the Russian word for it. Now, how do banks address P2P bank transfers? We either do it slowly without trusting the system, because if we do that, we are not sure that the recipient had received it. We do that similar to what are the conventional banking transfers. Or we do that card to card. But it is expensive, and it is not always fast. This problem could be addressed, but it is not the optimum. So that's why we need a fast payment system, pay to P2P, and then it will be possible to do that B2B, to have another leap. So it will be a technological breakthrough, disruption, that will provide access to the services to the customers. It will ensure the efficiency of the banks, because what does exist is not efficient and expensive, and it is one of the balances for the huge banks that process 65% of retailing P2P, and they even cannibalize their own banking cards system. It is bad for the big major player in Russia. So if there is a platform based on something, and it could be there are different options, so it will be good for everyone. To answer your question, at last, I apologize for that. So that thing complements the plastic international payments as well. And I have mentioned that banks use the payment system, the card, to make P2P payments which are not characteristic for them. And that system should be based on the telephone number, not on the number of the bank cards. So that's this system is being built. It is good. I think it complements the existing card system, the payment system. The payment system expand the existing systems, and paying system of Tinkoff banks do work in this area as well. It's quite possible that the bank cards will perish in the future, but not that soon. I think in 10 years the plastic will still be there, but there will be different types of payment. I have a chip myself, but I'm not going to tell you where it is implanted. Okay, thanks, Oliver, and we have Anatoly Aksakov, and it is good that you have made a proposal to also to review the draft law, and the understanding is to launch the law together with the advent of the technologies. They shouldn't be waiting one for another. We shouldn't forget about the critical things for the banks, and I hope that Anatoly, we will have a second hearing in the parliament and with positive deliverables, right? I have a question for Anton now. Moscow Exchange is one of the major infrastructural projects for the country, and it was successfully designed and implemented. At the same time, it is the venue for innovations for commerce and new approaches to the clients, and they are willing members of the AFT, and the point is that the banking services are good, but we, as the holders of the large infrastructures, we consider ourselves as one of the participators of implementing the innovations. What are the priorities then for you, and where do you think you could be useful for the financial system in the future through digitalization of your services? Thank you, Olga. Let me start with a short sort of a talk of what has happened at the capital markets, where the system we are discussing now was developed some 10, 15 years ago, like with the such key components as open API and all the things that simplify things for the end users. And it is unified data repository with the identification systems to ensure the financial transactions. In the past 10 years, the capital markets have changed drastically. Such an ecosystem was put in place. And so what has happened? There is a new class of players in all the areas. The first thing, it is robotization, automatizations of the trading. You must know that even at the Moscow Exchange, all the trading sessions are automatic. The robots consume the data from the repository that they have access to at the rate of microseconds, and so the standard time is 300 microseconds. You just wink and 1,000 of transactions take place. And another story that took place is simplifying access, and everything that should be done is to have such things as direct market access, sponsored market access. The point is that the investors had an access to the infrastructure, and that resulted in drastic changes. Previously, the exchanges were a close club for the investment banks, but the new ecosystem up to the physical persons everywhere in the world, even in Russia, have direct access to financial markets. They can make basic financial transactions with currency, bonds, securities, and getting it for the prices of the wholesale market. So passing through this experience, and how could we be useful for the association of fintechs? We can operate the repository of data that could not be tapped. And we are the repository of all the financial information at the financial markets, and we can protect it. and it could not be hacked. And I think the construction of the new system, the repository like that could be serviceable for all the players is a must. Another thing, we are a company that operates open API for all the market, and it's not only the capital market that the open API are used. And so when we are talking about open API, we should use the existing incumbent channels at the rate that is too slow for the banks. It is microsecond, even the online transactions. So if we talk more about the ecosystem for the financial market, that's what we are discussing now. I think we are at the position where the capital markets were 10 years ago. The markets changed, the role changed, and the classical commercial banks are doing P2P lending, and it turned out that one element of the infrastructure is required, to have the history, the track record of the credits, and then the physical persons are providing loans to physical persons, peer-to-peer lending. And it turned out the lending club has the volume of retail loans of some 15% from the whole balance of the Citibank, if I'm not mistaken. So that is the example of the transformation that we will be witnessing in the near future. If the world is developing, and we are pretty close technologically to this state, and after we resolve the problem of identifications, and we will open up opportunities for opening accounts remotely. If this infrastructure is available, then I think drastic transformation of the market will start. That's what happened with the capital market. So when we talk about marketplaces that we wish to discuss, I would like to say that the exchange is exactly the marketplace where we sell basic products. Like if you need to exchange a currency or to place money overnight or to buy stocks or bonds, that's what is happening at the exchanges. And when it works fine, then there are good examples of demediation of the financial resources. The relevant example for us is a conversion of currency. When there was a direct access provided to the physical persons, even if they have to report to the branch and sign the paper, then the major currency exchanges are done at the exchange, and that's what happened virtually in the past couple of years. Another piece of news is related to the production of the financial services.
When we build this infrastructure, all the players must be technologically prepared for competing on the same rules that financial players have been operating for a decade. If we measure transaction margins with percentages, then other financial markets operate on the basis of 10,000 parts of a percentage point. And this has happened because of the final cost of investment has gone drastically down. And for similar phenomena to emerge, we need financial companies to be able to put their products on the shelves. So we need modern online financial product shops. And we are considering making our own marketplace. It's not going to be the only one, but this is going to develop. So, and in conclusion, let me say that if we look upon the wholesale market and the stock exchanges, we are technologically a unique infrastructure from the perspective of risk management, we have the world's best system running at a rate of 300 microsecond to control risk. If we build identification on that, this may turn into a Russian Rosatom of finance, and we can begin to export this structure. Our colleagues from India are very conservative about it, but they have told us that to be identified in their system does not take being an Indian citizen. So I also think we have a chance to build a new technological Switzerland. But as a first step, you need to build it within this country and test its competitiveness. Let's look at this slide. As a result of our discussion, my colleague panelists and I have come to three obvious things and conclusions that we all share, whether we are Russian or Indian regulators, whether we are a bank or an exchange. We all believe that to move on and to create a new quality of life for ourselves and for the nation, we need to be partners in creating elements of infrastructure without preventing businesses from developing different ecosystems or from competing on equal terms. And we need to encourage the development of technology. The second point is that regulators, indeed, and our country is a good example, or maybe not very good, but this is something we must take an active point on. So we must encourage competition in the financial market. And my third point is that whatever we do or are going to do in the near future is something that should serve us as people. Both business models and new platforms and new types of banking should be customer-oriented, because customers demand radically new solutions, speed and reliability, and a consolidated stand. In the middle, you can see the platform solutions that we have discussed by the AFT with our colleagues, and we indeed believe that an ID and digital profile system is critical for a fast development of both financial and non-financial sectors. What the Bank of Russia is doing as a complement requires disruptive technologies and platforms, because traditional platforms are no longer in line with market needs, and the Bank of Russia is very active about it. And I hope that next year we will see new results concerning bank payment system and messaging system that we are already testing with distributed registers. As regards the registration of transactions, this is the subject of a separate panel to be chaired by Sergei Shvetsov. It will be about how many marketplaces there should be, what they should look like. This will be tomorrow's morning discussion, and I'm sure it will be of great interest. And of course, what connects these platforms, open APIs, I believe this is what technology companies should develop. What we need to do is to set standards for the market to apply them in line with their understanding of their business models. And with this, I'd like to conclude our discussion. We've managed to make it in time, and despite the large number of technological details that we have discussed, this was interesting, and I hope that next year we will demonstrate this system operating and what will come out of distance banking tomorrow.